This is Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? Hey, welcome to Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? I'm Molly Stillman, and this is a podcast where I get to sit down with a different guest each week and have raw, funny, often brutally honest conversations about the things that matter most: faith, business, life, and everything in between, where we each learn how to be good stewards of the things we've been entrusted with, even our stories, and how we can use those things to serve others and leave our families, our friendships, and our communities a little better than we found them. I want to create a space where people are unafraid to be themselves and unafraid to ask the questions the rest of us are thinking. My goal is to make you laugh, cry, and laugh till you cry. My guest this week is Jenell Jones. Jenell is an early education entrepreneur currently operating multiple early learning centers, which specialize in providing high-quality learning experiences to children who experience trauma in low-income areas. Her background in education includes earning a bachelor's degree in business management and a master's in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis on autism spectrum disorders. She is a native of Phoenix, Arizona, and has provided her expertise to families for the last decade and hosts private discussions with foster and adoptive parents on current issues affecting the non-traditional home. She is the author of the new book, Shattered, in which she tells the raw truth behind America's foster and adoption system, sharing the day-to-day realities and challenges of raising children with mental and physical limitations, and tells parents and would-be parents what they need to hear. It won't be what you expect, and you're not alone. She is an adoptive mother who is still trying to find the answers to questions that are tough and challenging. But through her story, you're going to see a mother's eyes as she shares her deepest pain for her daughter and for the foster and adoptive system. I was so excited to have Jenell on the show. I have really wanted to have a conversation around the topic of fostering and adopting and the challenges and nuances with it. And Jenell is just a breath of fresh air when it comes to being really raw and honest about these things. And so if this is a topic that is on your heart in any way, you are going to love this conversation, and it's really going to encourage you and challenge you. And I'm just really looking forward to it. So without further ado, on to my chat with Jenell Jones. Jenell, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to be here.
I'm very excited to have you because before we were recording, I learned that you are also a small farmer and I'm a small farmer. And I just feel like, and I'd love for you, if you agree or disagree with this, like when you meet somebody else who is kind of living off the land or just, you're raising animals, you're doing the thing. It's like there's this immediate connection where you're like, you're my people.
As you get it. Like there's just so many things you don't have to explain. And there's like this unsaid language of why we do this, right?
Yes. I love it so much. Well, I've really been looking forward to having you on the show because when I first kind of got introduced to you and your story, I was just blown away. So let's dive right in and have you give us the Jenell 101. So who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
So I always like to start off by saying I'm just like a normal person. I am a mom. I like to pride myself of being a mom of 7. I have 2 bonus kids. I have 3 that I gave birth to, and my 2 adopted. My youngest 2 are my 2 adopted. I have a couple childcare centers, one in Phoenix, Arizona, one in Mesa, Arizona. And I'm just like a normal person because I used to go to basketball and drive kids to school and try to, do the insane things around your family schedule and still try to be a person. And, I'm a mom that struggles with all things mothers do. It's never enough. And there's not enough of me. And what do I give to myself? So that's a little about me.
So I know that a huge part of your story is your journey of becoming a foster and adoptive mom. And this is a topic that is a topic I'm very passionate about. We have not fostered and adopted kids ourselves yet, although we have kind of left the door open for when God kind of allows and calls us to that. But I grew up with a sister who, in a lot of ways, we called her our foster sister. My parents, it's a long story that is not for this podcast, but I grew up with parents who always brought people into our home, where, the door was always open for if somebody needed a place to stay, if there was a kid who just needed some extra support, whatever. And like I said, and then I kind of grew up with this foster sister who lived with us for many years. And so she was a part of our family. And so this is a thing that's really big on my heart. And I obviously have been very, we support a lot of our friends who foster and adopt, because I always say, like, if you can't in that immediate season, support families who do and things like that. And so I know that this is obviously a huge part of your story. And in fact, you've just released a book. Congratulations. It's called Shattered. And it's a lot, really this honest take on the adoption and foster care system. And so I would love for you to kind of start at the beginning as to what led you to feeling called to getting involved in the foster and adoption system, because as we very well know, like, this is not something that is for everyone and is really a calling. And so how did that first happen for you?
I want to say, because of my background in early childhood, and we are that family that always would have all the kids over because we have so many, children are not really I'm used to them being around, and we are kind of one of those families where if somebody needs something, they end up at our house, whether it's 2 days, 2 years, right? And my youngest son came, both of my foster children came very quickly. My youngest son, I got a call. I needed to go to the hospital because my cousin had a child. We got there. He needed a home. I called my husband and I brought him home. Wow. Literally that quick. My daughter says, we woke up with like 4 kids and we went to bed with 5. Like, what happened? Yeah. Like, nobody did it. And with Mercy, it was almost that quick. I had made a connection with her at church. So like, she would smile, I would wink, and one day the pastor's wife said to me, "Oh, little Nikki needs a home." That's who she is at first in the book before we change her name. And I was like, "Oh, I like little Nikki. We have a connection." And I mentioned that we would be interested. Next thing I know, I'm in a room and we're bringing her home. Wow. And my husband's response to it was, "What's one more?" And literally that's how quick. So I can't say that I had this calling. It was just like she needed a home. And I do know the studies that older children don't get adopted. They don't get picked up. And that's always been something that I've always thought, like, oh, like, what if something happened to us and my kids ended up in the system? I would pray that, like, as older kids, somebody would take them. So, those are little foundational things about me. But yeah, I didn't that day, even with Nick, that a couple months before, I never thought I would have taken another child in.
Wow. Well, it's interesting the way that you tell that story, because I have quite a few friends who have very similar stories, who kind of had this moment of they were always open to the idea. And then it was like, God was like, "Okay, you're open to it. Well, here it is." And that's, I think, in some ways, and I won't get off on this digression, kind of where my husband and I are. It's like, we are open to it. And when the opportunity, like when God calls you to say yes or opens the door and you can't say no, then that's where you are. But I know obviously that can sound almost very like fairy tale. And it's like, oh, wow, that's beautiful. You're growing your family and you're bringing children home and it's wonderful. And then for people that don't understand the ins and outs and the trauma associated with all of these, like, yes, adoption and fostering is beautiful. Absolutely. It's a picture of God's grace and God's mercy and what he does for us and how he adopts us into his family. But there's also trauma and there's brokenness in so many aspects of this. And so, I just would love for you to share what was sort of the moment where I guess the scales have kind of got taken off of your eyes? I don't know if that's really the word I'm looking for, but you know what I mean? Where it was the rose-colored glasses, I guess is really more what I'm saying, where you began to learn this is a whole lot harder and more difficult and more broken than I probably could have anticipated.
For me, I have to say it took a while. And the reason being is because so in my centers, I work with low income traumatized children. And so I've had difficult children, right? And so I'm one of those people that when I dive into something, I just dive in. And so it was the education stuff, like she was struggling in school. Well, she had 21 placements. And so a lot of things were not told to us. And as they were being uncovered or revealed, or I was finding out, I was like, well, she had 21 placements from 3 to 8. So of course she has no educational foundation if she starts school at 5. Somebody calculated it's like every 4 months she was being moved homes. So I'm like, okay, well, you're having a lot of struggles in school. So let me get you tutors. Let me help you. Let me do this. Let me do that. Let me put you in this reading program. Oh, it's going to take a little bit more time. Oh, she's having adjustment issues, right? She's never had a stable home. So a lot of things I was not realizing the magnitude, the scale stayed on because I was just trying to find solutions. And it was really about 2 years in when I started seeing signs like, what are those claw marks all over your arms? And then it's not coming to me quickly. And I'm like, I think that's self-injurious behavior. Like I'm in bed and like literally God's like, that's self-injurious behavior. And like I'm popping up and I'm running to the room or I'd hear her say things like, kids can say, I hate you. I hate myself. I don't want to live. I've heard it before. Right. But it was like, ooh, she really serious. And really, when my youngest daughter that I had given birth to, all crap broke loose when she went off to college. So my daughter ended up going to school in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when she did, Mercy just fell apart. And it got to the point I couldn't keep her out of the hospitals. Wow. So that's about when, and probably the biggest moment was I was in a hospital room. I describe it in the book. I was in the hospital and they asked her, they said, do you hear voices? And she said, yes. And I'm like, what? You hear voices? Because who asked that conversation? Who asked that question? Yeah. Like, do you ask people, do you hear voices? So when that nurse said yes, I was like, oh, we're dealing with something else.
Wow. Well, I know one of the big things that you are an advocate for and just somebody who's really trying to raise awareness and education around this is the lack of, really, we could do an entire podcast series on the foster and adoptive system and how broken it is and how it's difficult and expensive and just all the things, but also just the lack of resources for kids in the system, for the parents, for the caregivers. There's just so many things all along the way. And what were some of the things that you learned early on and realized, oh, this is, wow. There's just really not the system here or the support here that should be.
First of all, I'd like to say, I think I've learned that the caseworkers, the people at the system, I don't think they understand the magnitude of what's going on. I also don't think they understand what it's going to take to get one of these children whole, right, and to get the resources they have. So we have state level insurance. Well, the doctors aren't always adequate. And I don't even know. I feel that a lot of times we're getting new doctors fresh out of school because, it's a very difficult job. And these are not textbook kids. With the amount of trauma and brokenness that they have, they need more than that. And oftentimes, because of the high turnovers of caseworkers, therapists, doctors, we're creating additional issues, additional abandonment issues with these children. These children really need continuity of care. So I think people don't understand what's going on. What we have children and when you have children and you're their mom and dad and you're advocating for your child, right? You're looking at what can I do that's the best? I want the best school I can get, the best daycare. I'm reading reviews on the doctor that I take my child to. They don't have that advocate. And so that's really hurting them because they don't have an advocate and they don't have a voice to say, we need a little bit better.
Wow. Well, I know that obviously, like we've said, this is something that you're really advocating that you are trying to kind of step in. And I know that there are obviously so many other amazing men and women who are just like you, who are trying to step in and kind of fill that gap, but also advocate on behalf of both the children and those who are in the position of caregiver. What has been your experience to doing that? Has it been something where you're advocating at a state level or a federal level or community level? Like, what do you think if somebody is listening and they're also very passionate about this and they want to get involved in advocating for these kids and creating better resources for families? What are the things that feel like, because it can feel so overwhelming and it can feel like, how do you bite this elephant off one bite at a time or eat this elephant one bite at a time when you're like, I don't even know where to start. Where do you start? Where have you started? And what are things that everyday people like me and people in my community or churches that, and I know that you and I come from the same lens of the church needs to be leading the way in this, and how do they best do that?
Right now I've started with telling my story to rally other people around us, because it's like you said, it's a huge elephant. And I'm hoping that we can get a few people that are passionate, that are in the right places to push it out. I think one of the biggest issues we have is because these are children and everything is confidential, there's so much hidden. It's in the dark, and we've got to bring it to light. Or what you get is you get families that have been so traumatized, they tuck and they run away. And nobody tells a story. How many stories have been told? There's not very many. You'll hear people complain about how bad it is, but who's going and being transparent and saying, this is what really happens? And until we can bring that to the light, nothing can happen, because a lot of people don't see it as a problem. There's no voice. So that's the first thing. And then we have to find where to go. I'm not sure where to go. That's what I'm looking for. I need the people to help me say, this is where we're going. Because I can tell you, I'm still battling with my child, and I'm still getting raked over the coals. Like, there has been better in my story. It's not that much better. And they are still abusing and traumatizing me. Like, I've been battling with them all week long, and it has not been pleasant. And I'm losing right now. So where do we go to make parents successful? We need everybody, whether they're parents or not, whether they're a celebrity or whoever. We need somebody to help us be a voice and to say, this is not right, to get us in the right places where our stories can be heard.
I am curious, especially as a mom who has, given birth biologically, you have bonus kids, you have adoptive kids, you have fostered children. How has this very wide variety of motherhood experiences shaped you as a mother and your own walk as a mother, your walk with the Lord, your marriage, all of those things?
I don't even think I realized the cross God has given me to bear until recently, and being a mother of all the different levels. I don't think I'm unusual, but maybe I am. I feel that I love my children the same. Once you're mine, even, once I bring you in that circle close to me, I'm going to fight to death for my children. Right. But what I've noticed is a lot of people don't do that. A lot of children, they don't have the same people fighting with like the same tenacity for them, because they're kind of out there. And those are the kids that need it the most. And I have to think of, God's love he brings us all in no matter what we've done, how we've sinned, and he loves us anyway.
Right.
And so I kind of look at that like we're not showing God's love when we're leaving those children out there. We're not loving on them, and they need us the most. They don't have the resources. It's a difficult cross. I can't say that other people's crosses aren't big and difficult and painful, but I mean, like, why am I doing this sometimes? Like run, but I can't walk away. So many people had told me so many times, just walk away, and I'm like, I can't do that because then what's going to happen to her and the other children like her?
So I know that we've alluded to this, but I think it's really important. I'd love for you to unpack it about your faith and how your faith has played a role in all of this and your walk with the Lord. And, I kind of, like I said at the beginning, I think adoption and fostering, especially, like, it's just beautiful. And I mean, the whole adoption and foster care system came out of Christianity. I mean, like the Lord called, I can't remember the exact story of the origin of what was happening, but there were babies and there were children being abandoned who were Christians were literally like picking them up off of the street and bringing them into their home. And that's like how it started, obviously, like hundreds of years ago. And so, I know that this is a huge piece for you. And so can you kind of share how that has played a role in this for you?
I can honestly say that, like, my faith walk has been strengthened in this journey. I don't think I'd ever prayed so much. And I'm always, one of my favorite scriptures is Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good for those who love the Lord. And some of the things that I see are so awful, even in reading the book. That's the one thing that I keep reminding myself of. Like, there's got to be good in this. There's got to be good in the suffering. There's God is going to get the glory somehow. All these things have to be brought to the light. And that's what keeps me going, is knowing that somebody, I don't know if it's going to be me, my prayer is somebody else does it. Like, takes my mantle and goes on forth. Like, please, like, I'm definitely a background person, but that's what gets me through, going, you know what, if these children can suffer and they can go through, somebody has to come through and hold their hand and pick them up and dust them off and tell them it's going to be okay. And somebody has to be there and be faithful, just like God is there and faithful with us. And so that's how I keep going. That's my walk with God, and comforting me through lots of tears, lots of just crying, because it's just unfair and it's just not nice. But God didn't say it was going to be easy. It wasn't easy for Jesus on that cross.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, Jesus' journey wasn't easy. So we can't expect ours to be either.
You said something earlier that I think is really interesting, and I would love for you to unpack a little bit. And that is how you talked about, because we are navigating this situation, all of this with children who are minors. And so there's, things in place that protect their privacy and all of that. But then on the flip side, there's, like you said, kind of a lot of secrecy and hiddenness around this, so that the stories are not being told. How do you envision a way, and there's going to be a wide range of opinions and thoughts and approaches to this, but I'm curious, from your experience, how do you navigate protecting kids and their privacy and their stories, and not exploiting their stories and not using their stories because a lot of times, especially there's a whole conversation around, are we being exploitative when we tell someone else's story, when we do we have permission to tell their story, all those things, while also bringing some of these issues that need to be brought to the forefront to light. How do you honor the privacy and the protection of individual children's stories, while also highlighting the reality that both kids and caregivers are facing? How do you navigate that tension?
I think we're going to have to tell their stories and protect the kids. So we're going to have to hide their identities. We're going to have to, maybe change facts of where it occurred, but we need their stories. We actually really need the data, even when it comes to getting them the help they need, the trauma that they faced. I really do feel that our doctors and therapists are not given enough data from real situations, because how do they know how bad the trauma is that these children are facing and really what they need, even on new diagnosis, if the stories aren't being told? With my daughter, she is very, because she doesn't have a bond with everyone, she won't give all the real information and the real data if I'm not present. So if we're not telling the stories, then how do we know how to treat these children? And if you really look at the amount of adopted and foster care children that are in the prison pipeline, which is their high numbers, I've read studies from 20 to 40% are homeless, and they were former adoptive and foster kids. Now, I'm not sure the validity of these studies, if they were casual or how they came about. We need more of these studies. We need the real data in order to see what's really happening. And that's a huge problem. That's why we have to not exploit, but we need this information for real data and for real facts and for real change. And so how do you get it if you're not talking about it, if you're keeping everything silent? So I really do feel that this is a plane that's going to have to be built as we're flying it.
That's a really great analogy, building the plane while you're flying it, which is incredibly difficult. But with God, all things are possible. Obviously, I know that you are very protective of your kids and their stories. But one of the things that I know has been really challenging has been navigating the fact that there is some sibling separation within your own family and how common that is. And I just think about, my heart just aches and breaks when I think about that, because I know that your daughter has a twin brother who she was separated from. And, I just think about my own kids, and if, heaven for, who knows, like if something were to happen to me and my husband, and for some reason my kids were in the, the foster care system, and I can't imagine them being separated from each other, and just how challenging that is, and how devastating that is to pack on additional trauma. What has that been like for you guys as a family, and what are some of the things you hope to bring to the surface when it comes to this very real issue?
One of the things I was thinking about, I believe I was talking to somebody about it, is who came up with this?
Yeah.
So my daughter has about 10 siblings. Oof. And I get that you may not be able to keep 10 children together, but to separate twins, it's like, who in their right mind thinks of that, And from what I'm gathering a lot of times, and just in dealing with the social workers and the caseworkers, I don't know if one person should be allowed to make these decisions.
Yeah.
I asked somebody, I was like, was there a psychologist on the team? Was there a doctor on the team? Was there a parent advocate? Who was on this team? Because who in their right mind would just think that this is okay? I think you could ask people on the street and they would say, no, that's a bad idea. And so who is making these decisions and these policies and are saying that these things that are being done to children that have already been traumatized, we can all agree just being taken away from your parents is going to be trauma, regardless of what you were facing in the home. And we're going to all agree that whatever they were going through, it wasn't good if they're now in state custody. But as state agencies, as, parents and advocates of these children, we have to make it a mission that once these children are in the system, the trauma and the abuse stops. That has to be a goal. And I know this is a goal that's achievable because, like, in early childhood, in your child's preschool and daycare, abuse isn't allowed to happen.
Right.
Why is that? Because we put measures in place. We've put measures in place. We want best practices. We want continuity of care. We have rules and regulations that child care centers abide and are governed by, and they're caring for the majority of our nation. A lot of working parents use childcare, and you don't see us on national news all the time about abuse. And when big things happen, you see it. I think it was in October, you had the case of the providers that were scaring the kids. Well, I can promise you that a lot more than scaring occurs in our foster system with our adoptive kids, but none of that's talked about. And I'm talking about once they've entered the system, not before. So I know we can do something that's going to be better because we've done it in the childcare setting.
Absolutely. Well, I know that you're, a big part of your own personal advocacy. And again, going back to just highlighting some of these, these darker issues and the things that, as you kind of said, have been hidden is through this book, Shattered. And what is your hope, your prayer for people to take away from this book?
So I always like to say, this book was not written to discourage people from adopting and fostering children, but it really was just the honest take of what could happen with what's going on in place and the things that we're not told and what the true impact of a family could be if we don't have proper measures in place. So what I'm really hoping is that the conversation starts so we can protect the children in the manner they need to be protected and the families that want to take care of them. I wrote it so we can find more resources and so we can do better.
Amen. Amen. Well, I know that you also do a lot of work in your own community in Phoenix, Arizona, in your hometown. What are some of the things that you are currently doing and what are you working towards?
So right now, where it's about this book and getting the word out, everything that I'm doing is listed on my website. And so there's numerous things going on, numerous articles being written, and even some things that I'm writing. And so if you want to find out everything I'm doing, it's all listed right there.
Amazing. Well, how can people best connect with you, get in touch with you, support the work they're doing? What is the best way for them to do that?
So on that website, JenellJones.com, I'm very reachable. And the other thing I can say is, like, with the book, I tell people, I'm like, it's not really about book sales, but it's really about getting this book in the hands of the right people, right?
Yes.
So that's also my goal, is that people get this book and they put it in the hands of the right person. It's a rough read. It's honest. And so I get it. Like, it's hard to read, but we need it to get to the people that really need to read it and really need to understand what's going on for the change, because that's really the goal. It's to change things for these children.
Amen. Well, also, I am curious for people listening who, again, are really, feel a tug and a push in this direction to get connected and involved in supporting the local foster and adoptive care system. What is your recommendation for somebody who is currently considering or praying about this? Where to start?
If they are considering praying about adoption and fostering, I think they do start with their local agencies. But the one thing I want to say is, make sure that you're asking the questions. Make sure that you are building that team and that network before you do it. Find the experienced adoptive and foster care parents. Find the agencies. We're starting to put resources on my page of, like, all the agencies, all the podcasts, everything. And it's going to be growing and evolving. but build your team, build your support, and then be vocal. Don't just take it and go on and be about my family, but really join the movement, connect with others, and we have to become a strong community.
Amen. Jenell, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for the advocacy work you're doing. And I just want to, on a personal note, let you know that I am adding you to my prayer list and your family, and just want you to know that I'm going to be praying for you, because I know that this is not easy. And, the enemy just loves to see the brokenness and the trauma. And I just pray for God's protection over you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you loved it, and I would love to know what you loved or something that you learned. Let us know on social media. You can find me at Still Being Molly or at Can I Laugh Pod, wherever you get your podcasts and wherever you get your social media. And would you take a moment to head on over to whatever app you are listening to and leave a review and click that subscribe or follow button so you never miss a new episode when it comes out. Thank you as always for listening. Thank you for your support. Thank you to the team at Third Wheel Media for producing the show. And for you, I hope something this week makes you laugh till you cry. We'll see you next week. Bye.